Hi there, I am Jill Johnson Young, and I am here to talk to everyone on Lupus LA, wherever you are, about grief. Now, I know lots of people think that grief has got to be a sad topic, but it's Jill, and I'm not sad when I talk about grief and loss because it's part of life. And we've been surrounded by it this whole time. COVID has made grief everybody's existence, not just those of us who do grief for a living. I will tell you a little bit about me. I am a double widow. I've done grief before in my life. I am a grief therapist. I'm a grief speaker. I even teach therapists how to do grief because therapists, here's a clue, they don't get grief classes in school. It's an extra class, and sometimes it's not done well. So if you're reaching out for therapists, make sure they can tell you what they do with grief and loss. That being said, we're surrounded by grief. I see that lots of you had some questions that you sent in earlier. I will make sure we get to those. And Brianna is also online watching, so if any more come up after the first 15 minutes or so, she'll make sure that I get them. So I'll start the Q&A at about 15 after the hour, and I'll start with the questions that have already been sent in, if that's fair for everybody. I wanted to talk today about how COVID is getting to all of you, because I know it is. COVID has overtaken our entire planet. It has made going to the store scary, and for those of you with immunocompromised systems, it's become really scary to go out. It's even scary to go for a walk. I have a mom who lives next door to me. She's 84, and she's had lupus. She's not symptomatic now, but she's pretty frail, and she has dementia, so she can't remember to wear a mask a good portion of the time. So her world has been confined to walking around the block with one of us with her so that we can chase her down in case she decides to go chat, because Margaret likes to chat, right? There are lots of losses. I am working with people all day long who've had one loss, sometimes two, three, or four losses from COVID. Other people have had losses that aren't COVID, but occurred during COVID because people are still dying. And if their loved ones go to the hospital, they have the same experience almost as a COVID family because they weren't able to be there for the death any more than COVID families are able to be there. And very few families and loved ones are able to be there. And then everyone in the grief process, a funeral now has 10 people if you're lucky. Maybe it's a Zoom. I happen to be married to a funeral director. Funerals are tiny because we can't have lots of people together depending on where you are in the world. I talked to someone in Malaysia yesterday. They're not having funerals at all because it's not safe and their numbers are going up. So it really depends on where we are and where you're hearing this. But I get you're not able to be together when it comes to being able to grieve. And grieving together is what we've always done. We're finding graves now from the Iron Age, from my people, the Vikings. Yes, indeed, I am a Viking. And we're getting them even from the Neanderthals. And when they excavate those graves, they find that those people are laid out carefully. And there are bits of flowers still in the graves. And that is because we've always done grief together, even before there was even a known language. Grief should be done as a group. And right now we're in a mass loss and we can't. But we do know that in mass losses in the past, people have done okay. They've come out of that grief process in what we call post-loss growth, which means they've done the grieving and they've grown through the grief instead of moving into post-traumatic stress disorder and ending up in complicated grief, which is where nobody really wants to land. And I don't want you to land because I'm a solution-focused grief therapist. And I don't think we should do grief forever. I think grief should be a time where we finish up what's left, remember who really died, and then take them with us so that they can be part of our new life that we reorganize in a healthy way. That's a big challenge for folks who have illnesses as well. It's extra work. But we know it's possible. And we know that because we've been through the initial stages of HIV/AIDS back in the day. And yes, I remember back in that day, I was the first social worker for the Inland AIDS Project in Riverside, California. Nobody survived. It was very quick. It was one loss after another. just like COVID. And there was some, oh, only certain people are dying kind of bias, which we're also kind of seeing with COVID. Because, if you're old, I guess you deserve to die early from COVID or something. Or if you've got a pre existing illness, it's okay that you died. No, it's not. We also have been through 9/11, and there was a group of women who lost their husbands in the FDNY. And they all got together, they became the Surviving Sisterhood. And what we found from those two groups alone, in the research done with them, the people who survived multiple losses during the initial AIDS onslaught, like we've just had with the COVID onslaught and with the Surviving Sisterhood, is that the people who grieved every single loss as it came, adapted to it, and then went on to the next one, the people who had a support system, even if it was tiny, the people who could depend on even just a few people to listen to them, those were the people who did well. The folks who self-isolated and who didn't want to look at the loss and didn't want to talk about the loss and didn't want to mark the loss, those are the folks who didn't do well and ended up in complicated grief and ended up less healthy. And none of us can afford to be less healthy, and especially a group who've got other illnesses on board, we definitely can't afford to be less healthy. And I will be perfectly transparent, I had COVID at the very beginning, so I join you in chronic illness. Not lupus, but my lungs look just like those x-rays you've seen on the news. That's why my voice sounds like this. I take steroids too. That's where the face comes from. I join you in that. It's not as tough as lupus, but we all have to be more careful with our grief process and take better care of ourselves in that. We can say goodbye to those who have died, and we can do it in a way that will work, even if we have to do it again after COVID releases some of us. Now, some of you have had your immunizations. Some of you have been told not to. Some of you aren't at the waiting period yet. Even if you've got them, we're going to have to be safe. But at some point, we will be able to have a redo on those Zoom services, on those socially distanced funerals. We'll be able to go back and hug each other as we remember someone. And that will help us with our grief process, because we will once again be sharing it. So we can expect there's going to be some protracted grief, but it doesn't have to be terrible grief, right? We can put our energy into it, but not put the energy into resenting that we can't do it yet. We have had lots of family members who've lost multiple members, and COVID has made it hard because when someone dies of COVID, even if they're being notified, we can't go hug them and say someone just died at the hospital. If anyone's been exposed, we all have to be apart. And you guys definitely have to stay apart, because you can't afford to be exposed to anyone who's been around the person who died. And if you happen to live in a different area geographically, you can't get there right now. Not terribly safely. If you've got someone in Australia who's sick and you're an American, you are not going to get in. They're not going to let you. With very good reason. Right? Even in California, if you come to LA, you're not supposed to leave the county if you've come in for 14 more days, because we've got all kinds of safety precautions going. But it does mean we can't be together to share that grief, and we need to be able to do that in some way. So I will tell you, there are a lot of grief groups online. I am not opposed to those. I do want you to be careful. Don't go all in on one until you've watched what goes on in those groups. There are some groups that have a definite flavor of you have to have a certain faith and a certain belief in order to be able to grieve and say goodbye, or else your loved one is going to go someplace you would rather not think about. Or they are all in on you have to grieve forever. Anybody who doesn't stay in grief is somebody who is not demonstrating that they love their loved one enough. And that's just not true. I know if you put grief in on Pinterest, you're going to get all those sayings about grief lasts forever. Grief is the sum total of how much you loved someone. The love we have for people in our lives is not a pie. It's not like, okay, you've carved out this much for all these other people. I don't have any more left. I have to keep this for the grief for that one. Nobody else comes in. That's not true. When we lose our moms or our dads, there are other people who can step in and not be mom or dad, but they can certainly be a step in. If you lose a spouse, it is possible to be married and still love the person who died. Because you had that love for them before, that gives you space to use it again and to bring that person with you. It's a process, but it works. The other piece that comes along with COVID losses is it's caused all kinds of social media stuff. We see images that are scary. We hear thoughts that are scary. You turn on the news and it's got how many people have been immunized, how many people have died, every single flipping day, doesn't it? I turn on my Washington Post in the morning. There's the count right now, how many people have gotten a shot yet. That doesn't help our mental health, folks. That makes us stressed. And we have enough stress. So stop. Cut out the unhealthy social media. Cut out the news feeds that cause you strain. Cut out the stuff that reminds you that as someone with an immunocompromised system, you have to be more careful. You already know that. You don't need someone to remind you. You have those reminders all day long. Don't watch the stuff that does that to you. Don't listen to the commercials, like the one we have out here, that has a camera that pans down a hallway in a hospital, and all you hear are respirators. Like, you don't need that. We don't need more fear, and we don't need more terror, and we don't need more stress. So stay away from the social media, but find the support groups online that say it is possible to grieve, and it's possible to feel better, and it's even possible to grieve and smile at the same time. Because you can't grieve unless you're able to laugh and smile and enjoy the sunshine that today we have abundantly here. I know some of you don't in other places. You have to be able to put all that together to get through this process. And I'm not trying to give you extras to do. I'm trying to give you more that you can use to take care of you, right? We need to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. Now, there are other kinds of losses. I'm watching the questions coming in, guys. I'll get to them. We have financial stressors. People are losing jobs. They're losing houses. The people across the street from me, I adore them. The entire family was a catering business. And the entire family closed down 5 houses to 1, and they're all across the street. It's a little crowded right now. I do not begrudge that to them. They've been through a tough time. And now they're pivoting. Now they deliver balloon bouquets. Pretty nifty, huh? They'll be back to catering when the time comes, but they pivoted, but they had some significant losses. That's grief too. Losing their homes, that's grief too. Kids losing school contact, that's grief. People who have died and their pets have been left behind and the family can't absorb them, that's grief. Anytime something significant changes that can't ever return, that's grief. That's a loss. And it needs to be grieved so that you can get past it. So as you are thinking about everything COVID has done around you, maybe to your family, to others you love and care about, when you're looking at the losses, we should be looking at all of them, the sum total of them, so that we can help those who have had them. COVID doesn't mean we can't still help each other. I did a remarkable grief group for a group of folks who were all widows and widowers. We had 2 weeks together and then 8 weeks online because the pandemic came right in the middle. They were all over 75. And they all learned how to Zoom. That was incredible. They all learned how to do their background on Zoom. That was crazy making. They all learned that they could turn their background into a slideshow of every picture they'd ever taken. That was totally crazy making. But they also learned that the one who liked to make matzo ball soup could put on matzo ball soup in the morning, and at the end of group, whoever was having a tough time would get a knock on their door and see a car driving away, and they had matzo ball soup in a disposable tin container. Don't ever drop off food that you have to return the container for. Always, always use the disposables. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're taking care of people the best that we can. I see that Julie Stein is asking about the ring theory. I love the ring theory of grief, and that is designed to hold on to your energy. Your energy, as if you are the primary griever, everybody else's energy comes toward you. And then the next people out get some, and out and out. And these people should go in toward you. You shouldn't be going out toward them, right? We have multiple losses right now. And I saw an article the other day that described us having an energy bank as if we only have so much. My experience is, if we know there are other people having losses, grievers tend to step it up. So don't overdo, but do acknowledge the other losses. I can be sad and be grieving at home and still make the funeral potatoes, yes, those are a thing, and get them over to someone's house and leave them on the porch. So we should be able to hold on to the grief. What do people need? I'll look at the list of questions I've got, but what they need is they need their loss to be recognized. They need you to say the name of the person who died. Because when people die, others get a little weird and they stop saying their name. It's as if Mork and Mindy landed, grabbed them, and off they went, for those who are old enough to remember Mork, right? They lived, their loss is felt, their name needs to be said. At our house, every person who's died and every pet who's died has an ornament on our tree. And the ornament looks like them as they really lived. They are not the perfect pictures. They are the one in a dress that I know that they hated, and that picture goes on the tree. Or the cat hanging from the Christmas tree, that goes on the tree. Because that's how they really lived, and that's how we want to remember them. So we want to make sure we're saying their name, we're writing down the date that they died. Sounds creepy, but it's not, because in a year, you're going to make that phone call, and you're going to be the one who remembers first that they're facing an anniversary. And you're going to make sure on their birthday they get an email or a card in the mail. The pandemic is great for sending cards, and the Postal Service needs you to buy some stamps. So do a favor and send some cards. Okay? Let's see, other questions. What steps do I recommend for someone who lost a family member to COVID but hasn't had time to grieve while working from home? I recommend a journal in a way big hurry, because even with teaching kids at home and working from home, you can write down in a journal at the end of the day. You can empty your head. You can also spend some time remembering them for who they were. You can make a list of the things you wish that you'd said to them, a list of things you wish that they'd said to you, what kinds of apologies you wished you'd made to them, and were they owing you any? Essentially the stuff that's left over from that relationship, you want to make sure you pull it forward so you can look at it, work with it, and finish it. Say the words out loud so that they don't go with you. If someone has died and you had plans with them, figure out what you're going to do with those plans. Are you going to do them in their honor? Or are you going to say, that belonged to them, let me figure out a way that I can honor them? There's an entire community online of COVID families who've banded together, and there's lots of them now, because they needed to do something to honor their loved ones, right? So we can do some things even while we're managing extra stressors, and taking care of yourself is number one. We need to make sure that we are getting outside and getting some sun, if it's safe with the meds you're taking. We need to make sure that you're eating some healthy foods, even if you're craving carbohydrates, because grievers love carbohydrates. We need to make sure that you are taking your meds as you're supposed to, not giving up on them because you don't feel like getting out of bed. We need to make sure you're getting some exercise to the best of your ability. And I know that can vary between everybody, but there's usually a way to do at least something so that you are moving your body, which helps move your brain chemistries, which helps us all. So I hope that helps with some of that. And somebody else, how do you help a friend who's going through a profound loss? The funeral potatoes, the showing up, the Do you want to leave your laundry outside? I'll come get it and wash it and bring it back to you. How about if I bring a chair and we sit like in the dark if we can't be out in the sunshine and have a cup of cocoa 10 feet apart with our masks on, and I'll just hold space. Grievers don't want to be told what to do. They want to have their needs recognized, and they want someone to hold space for them. They don't want to hear, let me sit down with you and tell you everything. They want to hear, I'm going to sit here next to you on the couch, which now means out on the patio or out in front, far apart, but together. And I'm just going to be here and absorb whatever you need me to absorb, even if all I do is companion you. That's what grievers need. What they don't want is to be told, you're doing it too fast, you're doing it too slow, you're not taking care of things the right way, you're not depending on your faith enough, or you're depending on your faith too much. They don't want to be told what to do. And they don't want to hear about stages, because stages belong in anticipatory grief. Stages don't belong after someone's died or you've had a loss. So don't ask them if they've been angry yet, because they may not ever be angry. They may not have any of those things because those belong ahead of time. We want to companion them, remember their name, remember the dates, remember the anniversaries. My first wife died on April 2nd. It'll be 11 years this year. And on April 2nd of this year, I'll take some time out and do some remembering. And I'll be okay because it's been a while. But I'll remember Linda for who she was. Not Linda who was perfect, because Linda was never perfect. She was an ER nurse. ER nurses, they are a different group of people. But I'll remember her for who she was. Do that for the people who've had a loss. Don't say you were so lucky, they were so wonderful, they were perfect. Maybe they weren't perfect at home. Maybe they just need to be remembered as you remember them for the good moments you had with them. I have someone here who wants to know how long the grief process takes. It depends on the relationship. It depends on the person. It depends on how much you work at it. If you're going to hold on to all the woulda, coulda, shouldas, you are going to be grieving for a really long time. If you're going to dive deep and say, this is who they were, this is what was great about them, this is what was not so great about them, this is what irritated me about them, and this is what I could do to irritate them, this is what made them laugh, this is what we love to do together, that's the person they were. And what didn't get said, so I can say it out loud and finish it and put it away. And am I going to do all the things we plan to do? Or am I going to figure out some ways to honor those plans? That's what you're looking for. There is no right, there is no wrong. There used to be this conventional wisdom. 1 year, you're done. And then there was the back wisdom that said the day the funeral's over, everybody goes back to normal. And none of that's true. It depends on the person, the relationship, and the work that you do. Okay? And if you're processing grief for losing your job or house, it's pretty much the same. You are grieving what really happened. You're writing down all the stuff. You're acknowledging what pieces you did and what pieces you couldn't do. And you're talking out loud about all the other things that came with losing that house or job, including neighbors and those sorts of things. Someone else says they felt heavy and depressed during the pandemic. Is that normal? Completely. I've spent all morning doing counseling with people online. And without exception, in the last couple weeks, that heaviness has been closing in on just about everybody. Why is that? Because it's like New Year's. Have you noticed that after Christmas, all of a sudden, every channel goes to who's died and how much the New Year's going to change things and auld lang syne, right? It's the Barry Manilow of holidays. When in fact, the New Year is just a different day. We're coming up on that 1-year anniversary that we really noticed COVID. Somewhere in the last month or so, depending on where you are geographically. And everyone thought, we're going to go home for a few weeks. The kids are going to come home for maybe another 4 or 5 weeks. And now it's been a year. And it hasn't been 20,000, it's been 525,000 that we've lost. It does close in. You are perfectly normal, but it feels really lousy. So The more you can do to take care of yourself and acknowledge that feeling, the better off you are. If you are someone who has been diagnosed with any kind of depressive disorder and you're on meds and you're feeling like it's closing in, call your doctor. Lots of people are increasing meds right now, and if your body can tolerate it, talk to your doctor. I'm not speaking as a doctor. I'm not telling you to increase your meds. I'm telling you, call your doctor and discuss it as a possibility. You might need that. Grief affects us cognitively. It makes us not think clearly, makes our heads feel like they're packed with cotton. It makes us forget things. It makes us not have a lot of energy for other people, makes us snappy, right? We are sometimes not very pleasant, and we're pretty forgetful when we are grieving. Physically, we can get sick. We can be tired all the time. It's not tired, it's fatigue, just like the fatigue you feel with lupus or other autoimmune diseases. But if you've already got that, it's like a double whammy. And if you are someone who doesn't like being closed in and you've been closed in for a full year, you're definitely feeling it. Acknowledge it. Talk to other people about it. Hop on some online groups and complain about it. Use all the blue language that I am not using right now. Because if we were in session, there would be blue language all over this, I promise. Right? And someone else is saying, this is really great. Having a chronic illness, I find myself grieving what normalness was like. I used to be able to go outside, and now I can't. And other people get to. And that's not fair. And I'm struggling because I really want to stay socially distanced, but I want to be back out there. And lupus patients are feeling really isolated. Yes, you are. My clients who are of lupus, which are not an inconsiderable number, are definitely feeling it. I get it. You are grieving. You can take little steps. You can't go out and play. I don't think anybody should personally, but that's just me. You're not going to go to the Santa Monica Promenade, but you might take a walk in your neighborhood and keep your mask on and smile at people and wave at people and engage in some conversation from a safe distance. You might have someone get you out in the car and let you go see some of the other stuff going on. Stop at a park and enjoy the experience of the park without getting close to people. You can have those bits. And then you can tell yourself, you're not doing more because you matter. And your health matters. And we all want you here when this is over. And at some point, it will be over enough that you can get back out there. But you're not going to if you put yourself at risk. So please don't. Talk online. Give yourself permission to feel all the feelings. Do what you can with it. And then make yourself a future board. Where do you want to go when this is over? I know some people call them vision boards. That's just BS to me. I don't want a vision. I want to know where I'm going. And I don't think if you just think hard enough it's going to happen. I'm not probably your typical woo-woo therapist. But if you put up that you want to go here, want to do this, want to go there, put them on a board and put it where you can see it. And while you're still at home, take whatever steps you can to make at least part of that happen. If nothing else, hop online and look for, if it's travel, look for deals. See if you can pay on one overtime that you can get a refund on. Or start a new something. Right? Take care of yourself, but allow yourself the feelings and make some steps toward where you're going to get to go. I hope that helps. Let's see, we've got lots of questions here. When in the grief timeline do I recommend someone see a grief counselor or therapist? Anytime. One of the conventional wisdom pieces is it's too early to go to therapy. You know, I've never met a too early. Not ever. But you do want to make sure you get to a good therapist. And you need to know that therapists are a lot overtaxed right now. Our community is absorbing more than we ever have in the history of therapy. Pretty much every practice is full. So put yourself on a list with someone earlier because it may be a while before they can get to you. And make sure you call multiples because some of them are not returning phone calls. And I apologize for that poor behavior. Our practice always returns phone calls. I'm with Central Counseling Services in Riverside and Murrieta. We return those phone calls. Some people are solo operators and they don't. but get yourself on a list and find someone who can tell you that they've had grief training. And let me tell you why. After each of my wives died, I called for therapy. And I dutifully went in because I'm a therapist and that's what we do. Here I am. I'm a new widow. I've got kids at home. I got a parent who needs some attention. I'm still working in my private practice and I'm working for hospice. Fix me. What I got was, if you woke up tomorrow morning and everything was better, what would be different? We call that the miracle question. It's helpful when you're trying to help someone find what goals they want in therapy. It's not helpful with a new widow because there's one answer. And my snarky self said, out loud, that's where masks are good for me, you don't have that power, she's in a box. And you can't put her back together again. So that's not going to work out so well. Second time, new therapist advertised that they knew grief. If you woke up in the morning, seriously, they did it again. I said, well, now that would be awkward because I'd be a bigamist and it would be crowded. And then the second thing she said to try to recover was, well, why did you remarry again in the first place? Didn't you check her health? Everybody with lupus who thinks it's fair to say, did you check their health before you got married? And thinks that's a good idea, raise your hand. Right? You want to find a therapist who knows what they're doing. You want someone who's going to listen to you, pay attention to you, help you get through the little bits to remember to pay the bills, and the big bits to help you walk through what's left of the grief. That's what you're looking for. Ask around. Other people will know who the good grief therapists are. Okay? Other questions? Julie says, thinking about the ring theory, we talked about that already. And how do we honor others when there's so many parallel grief losses and grief timelines? We honor each other. We take care of each other. I think we already talked about that, but there's a lot of discussion about that. And Julie, that was a really good question. We really want to make sure also that we are not isolating and that we're not letting other people isolate. Now, sometimes when you're grieving, you don't want to be around people. But don't do it all the time. You're allowed to have those days where you want to have a blanket fort. Blanket fort days are highly recommended. But not too many of them, not all in a row, and not to the exclusion of talking to the important people in your life. If we can agree to that, we're in good space. Peggy says our almost 6-year-old son died 30 plus years ago. We discovered who our true friends were. The friends who brought over meals, the friends who offered to take the other kids out, the friends who listened and spoke their name. Those are the true friends, and yes, they are. And I am sorry. I'm glad it sounds like you've healed and you've brought his memory forward with you. When people die, we lose people. We always do. That's part of grief. When I start a grief group, what's one of the first questions I ask? And everybody has lost someone. And it's usually someone really important to them. Not the person who died. Somebody else. The friends who don't know what to say, don't know what to do, didn't show up during the dying, so they're embarrassed. There's, in fact, a card maker who makes these hysterically funny, very true grief cards, and one of them says, I'm really sorry I didn't show up when things were so tough. I was embarrassed and didn't know what to say, and now I was too embarrassed to show up again. Can I come back into your life? I love that. You will lose people. You will also gain people. You will find, as you are grieving, that somebody else or somebody else's will move into that space. And so the people who didn't show up, they move to the outer circle. And the people who are new come in from the outer circle to the inside. And they become the new inner circle. And that's okay. That's what you want. Our lives are not static, and COVID has made an exceptionally dramatic difference in them. So if other people are putting themselves in and trying to become your people, try them out. Just give it a try. See what it's like. Let's see. The grief changes you. even as you learn to pick up the pieces and go on with many aspects of life, there are lots of things that change as you are grieving. There are families who don't know what to say to you. There are people who don't know what to say to you. There are friends who don't know what to say to you. There are ministers and rabbis who don't know what to say to you. Sometimes you need to do a little teaching if you got the energy. Other times, you just let them sit by the side. They'll come back around if they want to. Okay? We don't want to worry so much about those folks. We want to take care of ourselves. Questions have calmed down some. I'm looking for more. What else can we do during COVID for ourselves to take care of people? We've got kids going back to school. We can make sure we're listening to their anxiety about it. Some of them are going to be grieving that they can't stay home anymore, especially if they've got someone at home with a chronic illness. They may want to stay home and continue to be part of this new experience of being home where they can feel like they can be helpful, or at least keep an eye on you. And they may not want to go back to school. And other kids are going to go back to school and be upset that they can't stay there longer. Or they'll find out that some of their friends have lost family members, and then they'll come home with questions for you. So you want to be prepared for those pieces too, to let kids ventilate about that and give them space to talk about it. And when it comes time for funerals or memorial services, you want to make sure kids are included in them, because grief and loss is something they've experienced too this year. It's been undeniable. Every child I know knows the name COVID. They all know the word death now. A year ago, that would not have happened. A year ago, I used to get calls to the office saying, "Grandma's dying. Do we tell the kids? Do we take them to the funeral?" And I'd say, well, let's see. Either you tell them, or they're going to think Grandma got on a plane and doesn't like them anymore. So probably want to take them. Kids are very blunt about grief. They deal well with it if we're open about it. So let's do that for them too, in the midst of COVID. With health issues, you want to make sure you're telling your doctors if you're having losses in your world, because that might impact your health as well. And we want to make sure that they're paying attention to that. And you could also ask your doctor who they know to recommend as a grief therapist. There are some grief programs online, some formal ones. You're going to want to vet them carefully, because some of them are very, very, very faith-based, and if you're not, then you might not find a good fit. And if you were, but right now because of grief, you're feeling like you don't necessarily want to stay all that much in the religious aspect of your life, that's okay too. That's normal in loss. People who have a very strong faith sometimes have it shaken a lot. And when we've lost 500,000 plus people, lots of people are on shaky ground in terms of how they rely on faith and what they do with it. Let's see. Not seeing other questions. Let's talk about then the mass loss piece one more time to give people that chance to think about that more. When we have mass losses, we want to make sure that we are giving people the support they can have, the support you have to give to them, without giving too much of you. And if you are the one experiencing the losses, that you're reaching out to your support systems and waving the white flag. Put it up there. Tell them you need help. Tell them what's going on. If you've had a loss from COVID and it's causing you trouble because of thoughts you're having about what happened during the dying process, which is a really normal occurrence right now, get some education about what the dying process looks like. You can find that information at the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization. They have some things on there for consumers, and it will explain that process to you so that it's not frightening and you can get those thoughts out of your head. If you are someone who is in the process of trying to figure out how to do arrangements, remember you don't have to do them all right now. You can do one piece now and a bigger piece later. You can do a small service now and some kind of nice memorial or some kind of celebration of life later. Right? You can even rent the blow-up Irish pub which I personally want to do, so I may have to have a wake before I die. Because you can get a blow-up pub now that's kind of like a reverse bounce house. The stuff that's blown up is overhead, and you're working on the ground inside, but it looks like a pub. And you can have that memorial where you can bring some of the joy of that person's life into it. And if it's done late enough, even folks who are autoimmune compromised will be able to attend. So verbalize that. If you hear someone putting something together and you want to be there, put your 2 cents in and see if maybe we can slow the roll so you can attend too. This is your loss too. If you can't slow the roll, you can have your own memorial service. Even without COVID, there are lots of times where a well-meaning person takes the reins and does all the stuff for the memorial service and doesn't give the primary grievers enough of a voice. Those primary grievers can go off and do their own. They can do whatever they want with that. There's no rules. I know we think there are grief rules, but there aren't. The grief rules, just so that you know as we're closing out, go something like this. You are doing this too fast. You're doing it too slow. You're smiling too much. You are looking too sad, and you're going to make other people sad. You're making too many changes. You're not making any changes. What's wrong with you? You didn't get rid of the clothes. You didn't have the right kind of service. I need to critique it for you. I want you to remember that you do your grief your way, on your timeline, as you need it, with the people you need to have there. You get to set your own boundaries. And in COVID, you can still set boundaries. You can remember someone now and take care of the grievers and take care of yourself. You can write in your journal. You can remember them as they were. You can create a memorial at home for them if you want to. You can do a memorial table. You can do a memorial tree at Christmas or something at Hanukkah. There's lots of ways that you can do a memorial. And then there's ways to share that with others when the time comes. Right? As a closing, I'd like to recognize there's a brand new book out called The Beauty of What Remains. This is not my book. It's by Steve Leder, and he's a rabbi in LA. It just came out. And in it he talks about the end of Shiva, when someone who has died is Jewish and the family traditionally stays home for 7 days. And the community comes in and takes care of them, feeds them, nurtures them. And at the end of Shiva, the rabbi comes and takes the family outside and they go for a walk around the block to reintroduce that family in their new configuration, minus the person they loved who's died, so that they can rejoin their community and the community can see that they're okay, but they still need support. That, my friends, is what I think we need to do with COVID grief. We need to acknowledge it now, and we'll need to acknowledge it later. And we're all going to need to show up for each other. And for those who are ill and who have those kind of concerns of that nature, we need to do it in a way that works for you. So verbalize it and make sure that your needs are met too. You get to grieve your way as well. But we should all, at some point, start to acknowledge all the ways our world has shifted, and all the ways we are missing those people, and all the ways we're going to remember them. Are we going to make donations to Lupus LA in their honor? Are we going to make donations to research in their honor? Are we going to buy a park bench and put their name on it where they like to sit? Are we going to donate to an animal rescue because they love their service animal? How are we going to make sure their name continues to be said as we honor them and their absence in our community? It is 2:45, so I'm going to say we've probably reached the end of our time. If there are any other questions, please let Lupus LA know. You can reach me at jilljohnsonyoung.com or at centralcounselingservices.com. And if you'd like to have me back, I'm available to do more in-depth work on other aspects of grief. Otherwise, I wish you all the very best. Please take care of each other. Grief is a community experience, not a singular one. And we need to figure out a way to make our community work with us. If you need a grief therapist and you need help with that, let me know, or go online. There are some excellent resources for locating therapists online. Bye-bye. Brianna, is there anything else?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. Have a good day, everyone. Bye-bye.